The high desert wind carried two things in the year of 1879: dust and whispers. In Dust Mesa, there was seldom a difference between them. Both got in your eyes, settled in the back of your throat, and coated the world in a grit that passed for truth. The market square was a riot of noise, a brass-bright wound against the endless pale brown of the Arizona-New Mexico territory. A sorry-looking four-piece band blew sour notes into the heat from the hotel balcony, their tune trying to rise above the braying of mules and the sharp, fast talk of traders. The air smelled of unwashed bodies, hot metal, gun grease, and the faint, sweet sickness of cheap whiskey already spilled before noon. Clara Reed, known to the square as Miss Reed, the tincture woman, hated the smell. She hated the noise, but most of all, she hated the lie. She stood on the back of her small, borrowed wagon, a line of amber bottles gleaming in front of her. At 26, she had learned to make her face a pleasant, uninteresting mask. Her voice, when she pitched it over the din, was clear and steady, promising cures for everything from a weak heart to a wandering eye. "Dr. Solomon's Miracle Elixir. Gentlemen, ladies," she called out, holding a bottle high. "Bottled right at the source of the purest spring this side of the Rockies. Cleans the blood, settles the spirit, and guaranteed to put a spring in your step. Only 50 cents a bottle. 3 for $1. A few listless cowhands drifted closer, their eyes not on her, but on the hint of her ankle beneath her dusty brown skirt. She ignored them, her gaze sweeping the square, cataloging, filing, writing the story in her head. Her real tools were not these bottles of sugared water and laudanum. Her real tool was a small, leather-bound notebook tucked into the waistband of her skirt. Already gritty with the day, she was not a hawker. She was Clara Reed, anonymous correspondent for the San Miguel Gazette, and she was here to hunt bigger game than cowboys' nickels. Her hunt had a name: the Atlantic and Pacific Consolidated Railroad. The whispers in the wind had a name, too. They spoke of a dam, a great modern marvel of engineering that Silas Vane, the railroad's local foreman, promised would civilize this frontier. That was the public word, the private word, the one Clara heard in the saloons and read between the lines of the territory's rigged land office reports, was different. The dam would not civilize, it would conquer. It would choke the last free-flowing water, the Toby Springs, and divert it, not to the parched farms of settlers, but to the railroad's own speculative mines and new, empty towns waiting to be sold at a premium. The dam was a threat, a land-eating monster dressed in the language of progress, and she was here to expose the men who fed it. Her eyes found them. Across the square, standing in the thin shade of the sheriff's office, were the two pillars of Dust Mesa's particular brand of justice. Sheriff Pike, a man whose gut preceded him by a full minute and whose silver star was tarnished with more than just age. He was laughing, a wet, hacking sound, nodding too eagerly at the man beside him. Silas Vane was the opposite of the sheriff. He was lean, dressed in a black city suit that defied the heat, and he did not laugh. He watched the square with the detached interest of a man counting cattle. He was the railroad. He was the foreman, the land agent, the whispered power that made men like Pike bow and scrape. He represented the neatly typed letters that arrived at small ranches and dine hogans, offering a fair price for land that was suddenly worthless, its water source mysteriously drying up. Clara watched Vane tap a piece of paper against his glove. He was giving Pike his orders for the day. Her stomach tightened. This was the story: the casual corruption, the legal theft, the slow strangulation of a people by ink and steel. A shadow moved at the edge of her vision, and the square seemed to hold its breath for a second. The noise did not lessen, but the quality of it changed. The laughter became forced, the bargaining more brittle. On the far side of the square, where the sun-baked plaza gave way to the dry arroyo and the open desert, a third power watched. This one was not dressed in suits or tin stars. His name was Talin Begay. He was a man in his early 30s, though the high desert sun and the things he had seen had carved lines around his eyes that spoke of more years. He stood beside a rack of fresh hides, ostensibly trading, but his stillness was a thing apart from the market's frenzy. He was dying. He wore simple twill pants and a worn cotton shirt, but the heavy, dark turquoise necklace at his throat was older than the town of Dust Mesa itself. He had been a scout for the very army that had pushed his people onto this hard land. He had worn the blue coat and taken the silver dollars, believing in a promise of peace through understanding. He had learned to read the white man's maps, his words, his lies. The army had taught him well. It had taught him the precise shape of betrayal. Now, he served only his people. He was a protector of the grazing routes, the sheep herds, and the water. Above all, the water. He was a guardian of to-be. The spring the railroad now called a resource, and his people called a living relative. Talin's dark eyes were not on Vane or Pike. He knew what they were. They were coyotes, loud and greedy, but predictable. His gaze was on the families from his own clan, their face tight with worry as they traded wool for flour and coffee. He saw the new printed signs in the mercantile window. No credit to Indians. He saw the way the stockmen herded their horses, deliberately kicking dust onto the rugs the dine women had laid out for sale. He felt the tightening of a net that was not made of rope, but of laws he could not vote on and paper he could not sign. He was here to listen, to watch, to gauge the temperature of the white man's fear. It was running high. And then, a new sound cut through the market noise. A man shouting, running from the direction of the grain silos near the new, raw gash of the railroad tracks. "Raiders!" the man screamed, waving a dusty hat. "They hit the grain store, took everything. It was Indians. I seen 'em. A dozen, at least." The market froze. The sour music died. Clara Reed felt a cold jolt, not of fear but of certainty. She grabbed the edge of her wagon, her knuckles white. A setup. It stank of it. A grain store raid. The oldest, laziest excuse in the territory to justify a punitive action. To justify seizing more land. To justify calling in the troops. Or worse, the freelancers. Her eyes snapped to Pike and Vane. The sheriff was already puffing himself up, his hand on his revolver, his face a mask of practiced outrage. "Did you hear that, Mr. Vane, right under our noses? Savages!" But Vane was not outraged. He was not surprised. He simply nodded, a thin, satisfied smile touching his lips before he composed his face into a mask of civic concern. He had his excuse. From across the plaza, Talin Begay's head came up. He did not look surprised. Either, he looked tired. He had seen this play before. The missing cow, the burned fence post, the stolen grain. It was the drumbeat that always preceded the thunder of cavalry, or, more commonly these days, the quiet, efficient murder of bounty hunters. His eyes swept the crowd, looking for the spark that would light the fire, and his gaze, sweeping past the sheriff, past the shouting man, landed on the woman on the medicine wagon. For a single, held breath, their worlds touched. Clara met the man's stare. It was not the leering look of the cowhands or the assessing glance of a customer. It was heavy. It was ancient. He was not looking at her disguise. He was looking through it. He saw, she was certain, a white woman in a place she did not belong, standing on a box of lies. He saw a part of the problem. Talin saw a woman who did not look frightened in the way the others were. The other townsfolk were angry, or scared, or excited. This woman, she looked like she was calculating. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and cold. He saw the way her hand had moved, not to her heart in fear, but down, to her waist, where a gun or a knife might be. Or, he noted with a scout's precision, where a book was hidden, a dangerous thing, a book in the wrong hands. She was another kind of unknown, another piece of the white man's complicated, broken world. Then he turned, a ghost in the midday sun. He did not run. He melted back, away from the hides, away from the plaza, moving with a fluid, ground-eating stride that spoke of purpose. He had to warn the families at the spring. The lie was loose, and the guns would follow. The shouting man was now surrounded by a mob, each man adding his own detail to the story. I heard gunfire. They had war paint. They were headed for the ridge. Clara watched Talon go. She watched the mob grow. She watched Silas Vane lay a comforting, proprietary hand on Sheriff Pike's shoulder. "You will handle this, Sheriff," Vane said, his voice a quiet command that carried across the sudden silence. "Make the territory safe. The railroad demands it. Progress demands it." "Yes, sir, Mr. Vane," Pike blustered, his chest swelling. "I'll call for the Kestrel Company. May Kestrel knows how to handle this kind of trouble." Clara's blood ran cold. The Kestrel Company, not army, not militia, a private army of bounty hunters led by a woman, May Kestrel, who was said to be as cold and pragmatic as a winter snake. They were Vane's scalpels, cutting away any trouble that slowed the railroad's advance, legal or otherwise. The trap was set. The rumor was the bait. The dine were the prey. And the prize, as always, was the water. Clara Reed lowered the bottle of elixir. Her sales pitch forgotten. The story was here, raw and bleeding, right in front of her. But it was no longer just a story to be written. The man with the turquoise necklace was walking into the heart of it, and May Kestrel's guns were coming. She looked down at her dusty notebook, then back at the dust cloud where Talon Begay had disappeared. The truth, she thought, was a heavier thing than a bottle of lies, and getting at it would likely cost a great deal more than 50 cents. It might cost everything. 3 days later, the town of Dust Mesa gathered to celebrate its own bright, mechanical future. The air was thick with a different kind of anticipation, not the dusty trade of the market, but the sharp, oily smell of new machinery and the hot press importance of a public event. Silas Vane, looking cool and certain in his black suit, stood on a wooden platform draped with red, white, and blue bunting. Behind him, the new test dam was a squat, ugly thing of raw lumber and packed earth, blocking a narrow section of the arroyo that fed the Toby Spring. It was not a grand structure, but its purpose was. It was the first cut in the artery. Today, Vane's voice, unused to shouting, cracked for a moment before finding its rhythm. Today, we mark not just a structure, but a moment, the moment progress, guided by the Atlantic and Pacific Consolidated, officially arrives in this valley. No longer will we be slaves to the whims of the seasons. This dam is a promise of green fields, of bustling industry, of a civilized land. A polite, nervous applause rippled from the townsfolk Vane had paid in whiskey and silver to attend. Sheriff Pike stood beside the platform, his thumbs hooked in his belt, beaming as if he had laid every plank himself. Clara Reed watched from the edge of the crowd, her medicine wagon parked near the back. She had sold nothing. Her stomach was a cold knot. She was not here as a merchant. Tucked under her shawl, heavy and awkward, was her one true concession to her trade, a box camera, primitive and slow, but the only kind of witness that Vane could not bribe. She had come to document a theft, disguised as a celebration. Vane raised his hand for the finale. "Let this be the day we turn dust. $2 I give you, the Dust Mesa Diversion Dam." He moved toward a large, ceremonial wheel, set to open the sluice gate in a symbolic trickle. He placed his gloved hands upon it, and the world exploded. It was not a deafening roar, but a deep, wet, violent thump that punched the air from Clara's lungs. A column of muddy water, splintered wood, and dark smoke shot 50 feet into the bright blue sky. The platform Vane stood on collapsed, sending him and the bunting tumbling into the mud. The crowd screamed. Men shouted. Women grabbed their children. For a single second, there was silence. save for the sudden, angry rush of the liberated spring. To be was free, and it was tearing its own dam apart. Then Sheriff Pike found his voice. He staggered up from the mud, his face purple, his revolver already in his hand. "Sabotage!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with a mix of fear and fury. "It was them savages, the grain raiders. This is an act of war. They've declared war." Clara did not move. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her mind was ice. She saw Vane pulling himself from the wreckage. He was not hurt, and as he wiped the mud from his face, his eyes were not shocked. They were not surprised. They were cold, and they were calculating. He looked directly at Sheriff Pike and gave a single, sharp nod. The performance was over. The trap was sprung. As the crowd surged back toward the safety of the town, Clara Reed did the opposite. Her training, the hard, bitter lessons from cities back east, took over. Never run with the crowd. Run toward the story. She hitched up her skirts, grabbed her camera box, and used the lingering smoke and panic as cover. She scrambled down the muddy bank toward the source of the blast. Vane's own railroad bulls, men who were not on the payroll as security but as laborers, were already fanning out, moving with a purpose that looked less like a response and more like a plan. They were pushing the townsfolk back, but they were not investigating. They were sealing the area. "Ma'am, get back," one of them shouted, grabbing at her arm. "My wagon," she cried, feigning panic. "My elixirs, I think a box fell." He shoved her, uninterested. "Get now." She stumbled, letting herself fall near a tangle of wreckage, and she saw it, half buried in the red, wet mud, gleaming like a vicious piece of jewelry, was a twisted piece of metal. It was not a part of the dam. It was copper and wire, a detonator cap. Her blood went cold. She knew what she was looking at. She had seen sketches, back in the Gazette's files, of ordnance used in the last war. This was not a Navajo fire stick. It was not a farmer's blasting powder. The markings were clear, stamped into the metal. United States Army ordnance, the kind the Army sold as surplus, the kind the railroad bought by the crate to clear tunnels through mountains. This was the proof. Her hands shook. A sketch was not enough. She had to have it. She ripped her handkerchief from her sleeve, wrapped it around the still warm metal, and shoved it deep into her pocket. The sharp edge of the copper cut against her thigh. "Hey!" The voice was sharp, and it was close. "The medicine woman? What in the hell are you doing down here?" Two of Vane's men, not the hired townsfolk, but railroad men, their faces hard and their eyes empty. They had seen her. They had seen her pocket the cap. She was no longer a journalist. She was a witness who had just stolen the murder weapon. Clara bolted. She did not run toward the town. That was a cage. She ran for the open, broken land, for the arroyos and canyons that offered the only hope of cover. "Stop her!" one of them yelled. The heavy thud of boots on wet earth turned into the thunder of hooves. They were on horseback, and she was on foot. She slid down a sandy bank, her camera box banging painfully against her hip. A shot cracked overhead, the sound sharp and flat. The bullet whined past her ear, kicking up a puff of red dust 10 feet ahead of her. They were not trying to warn her. Her lungs were on fire. She was in a wide, dry wash, and they were gaining, whooping now, enjoying the chase. The wash ended in a high, sheer wall of rock, a box canyon, a dead end. "We got you now, you thieving bitch!" one of them shouted, reining in his horse. Clara pressed her back against the hot stone, her chest heaving, trapped. Then, a flicker of light. High on the canyon rim to her left, a flash, then two. It was not a rifle sight. It was a signal. It flashed twice more, sharp and insistent, pointing to a dark, vertical shadow in the canyon wall she had not seen. A fissure, a game trail. A second later, a small shower of pebbles and dust clattered down from the rim directly onto the men's heads. "What the?" one of them yelled, his horse rearing as he looked up. "Is someone up there?" "Just the wind, you fool. Get her." But Clara was gone. She threw herself into the narrow fissure, scrambling into the darkness. It was a trail, steep and punishing. Leading up the inside of the mesa, she climbed, her nails breaking on the rock, her camera box scraping and catching. She heard the men shouting below, confused, their horses unable to follow. She burst out at the top, into a sheltered alcove of rock, and fell to her knees, gasping for air. "You run loud!" The voice was quiet, and it came from the shadows. She looked up, her heart leaping into her throat. Talon Bigay stood not 10 feet away. He was not out of breath. He was not even sweating. He looked as if he had grown from the stone itself, his eyes watching the canyon below. "You!" she gasped, her mind reeling. You blew the dam!" He turned his head, and the look he gave her was colder than the spring water. "The white man builds a cage for our water. The cage breaks, and you blame the man who lives here." He shook his head, a look of profound, ancient weariness on his face. "No, that was your people's work." "My people?" she said, staggering to her feet, anger and terror making her reckless. "I was trying to stop them. I found this." She threw the handkerchief at his feet, the detonator cap, stained with mud and her own blood from her scraped hands, fell onto the rock. He looked at it. He did not touch it, but he leaned closer. He saw the markings. "Ah," he said. His voice was flat. "Army work, the kind they sell to the railroad. So, you found the truth, and they saw you find it. You have to tell people," she panted, the adrenaline fading, leaving her shaking. "This is proof. They framed you. They framed your people." He almost laughed. It was a bitter, dry sound. Proof is a white word, a word you use in your stone houses with your talking men in black coats. My people see a broken dam. Your people," he gestured at the town below, "see a reason to send guns, to send May Kestrel?" He knelt, picked up the cap, and weighed it in his hand. "You have proof. I have a dozen families, children and elders. I must move from the spring before nightfall, because your people will not wait for your words. They will come with rifles." "But if we show this," she insisted, "to the marshal, to the newspapers." "Show who?" He cut her off, his voice sharp. "Sheriff Pike." He held the hammer while Vane built the trap. "You will be in a cell, or in a shallow grave, before you speak 2 words. This." He held up the cap. "This is not proof. It is just a rock, and you have thrown it at the mountain." As if the desert itself meant to prove his point. A new sound drifted up from the town. A man's voice, shouting, a town crier. Talon moved to the edge of the mesa, motioning for her to stay low. He looked down on the square. Clara, drawn by a terrible curiosity, crawled beside him. A new poster was being nailed to the front of the sheriff's office. The words were painted in thick, black, angry letters. "Reward, $500 for the capture of the unknown female saboteur, aiding and abetting the Navajo war party of the renegade. Talon Bigay." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Unknown female. But they know me, the ones who chased me. They saw my face, and Talon Bigay, they named you. "They always name someone," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. He was watching the men in the square, noting who was arming themselves. "Today, it is my turn, and yours." She felt sick. This was her. She had been clumsy. She had been seen. She had made it worse. And then a colder, deeper dread settled in her stomach. She remembered a file she had acquired from the land office 2 nights before, a shipping manifest, a map. It showed the railroad's secret plan, a hidden pipeline, starting from the dam, leading miles north. Not to Dust Mesa, but to a new, unlisted silver mine Vane had claimed for himself. And on the bottom of the dynamite requisition form, a small, barely legible signature of authorization. C.R. She had assumed it was a foreman. Chuck Rogers, Cal Rhymes. She saw it now. C.R. Clara Reed. Someone back east, someone at her own paper, was feeding information to Vane. They had not just anticipated a journalist sniffing around, they had prepared a trap, baited with her own initials. She was not just a witness. She was the designated scapegoat. She looked from the damning poster to the town that now wanted her dead. She looked at the man beside her. A man only in this moment because his world was also ending. He turned, his gaze meeting hers. The calculation was gone, replaced by something heavier. The weight of a choice. "They will hunt you now," he said, his voice low. "The Kestrel Company will be here by morning. They will not stop. You have two paths." He pointed west, to a dark arroyo that snaked toward the setting sun. "You can go down. Follow that wash for 10 miles. It will take you toward the next territory. Maybe you will reach it before Kestrel's men find your trail." He then gestured to the high, darkening mesa behind them. "Or, you can come with me. You can come to my people, to the Council of the Elders. You can show them your proof, and you can hear our truth." He held his hand out. Not to help her, but to indicate the two choices, the dark wash or the high ridge. "The choice must be made now," he said. "The sun is setting." Clara Reed looked at the dark, swallowing mouth of the arroyo. It was the escape route, the logical one, the one that might, with 1,000 parts of luck, lead to her survival. She then looked at the high, darkening ridge. It was a path into the heart of the very danger she was running from. It was an unknown, a place where her rules and her proof meant nothing. She looked at Talon Bigay. His face was granite in the twilight, patient, but his patience was a weight. He was not asking her to trust him. He was asking her to choose a side. "I am going with you," she said, her voice rough. He did not look surprised. He simply nodded. "Once." "Then there is no time. The moon will be up in an hour. We must be gone before she shows her face. Stay behind me. Do not talk, and do not fall." The climb was not a climb. It was a fight against gravity, rock, and her own burning lungs. Talon moved like a shadow, his feet finding purchase on ledges she could not see. He did not offer her a hand. He expected her to keep up. She did, fueled by a terror that was stronger than her exhaustion. Her camera box was a lead weight, banging against her back. She thought of the men, Vane's men, finding her medicine wagon, finding her camera, finding her empty. The thought gave her a small, bitter surge of energy. After what felt like a lifetime, they reached a narrow plateau. It was not a camp. It was a hidden place, a fold in the rock that held a handful of hogans, the traditional homes of the Dean. They were round, made of earth and wood, and blended so perfectly with the land that Clara had not seen them until she was 20 yards away. A small fire burned in a central pit, its smoke low and smelling of juniper. Families were gathered, not in a panic, but in a state of compressed, quiet readiness. Children were being bundled, blankets rolled, and goats herded into a small, stone pen. They were preparing to move. Talon led her to the center of the gathering. A group of 4 elders, 2 men and 2 women, sat on blankets near the fire. Their faces were maps of sun and time. They looked at Clara, and their gaze was heavier than any she had ever felt. It was not hostile. It was not welcoming. It was simply deep. They looked at her as if they were looking at a strange weather pattern, a thing to be understood before it caused harm. Talon spoke to them in his own language. It was a quiet, flowing sound, at odds with the harshness of the land. He spoke for several minutes, his hands moving, gesturing first to the valley where Dust Mesa lay, then to Clara, then to the fire. One of the elder women, her hair a cascade of silver and black, interrupted him. Her voice was sharp. She looked at Clara and said a single, clear word in English. "Why?" The air was still. The entire camp, it seemed, was listening. Clara's throat was dry. I came to—" "Speak true," Talon said, his voice low beside her. Do not speak of what you came to do. Speak of what you did. Speak of what you see. They will know a lie before it leaves your mouth." Clara took a breath. She looked at the elder woman. "My name is Clara Reed. I came to Dust Mesa 2 weeks ago. I came to find proof that the railroad, the A&P Consolidated, was stealing land and water." She paused. "Today, they blew up their own dam. They did it to blame you, to have an excuse to bring soldiers, or worse, to clear you from this land, from to be." One of the men, his face lean and hard, spoke to Talon in Dine. Talon nodded. "Hasteen Yazzie asks how you know this." Talon translated. "He asks if you are the one who broke the dam." "No," Clara said, her voice shaking but gaining strength. "I am not. The men who work for Silas Vane, the railroad foreman, set the charge. I found this." She reached into her pocket. Her hand was sticky with drying blood. She pulled out the handkerchief and unfolded it, placing the copper detonator cap on the blanket in front of them. The elders leaned in. They looked at the cap. They looked at each other. "This is Army-made," Clara said. "The kind the railroad uses for blasting. It is not yours." Hasteen Yazzie nodded slowly. He had seen such things. He looked at Talon, and a silent conversation passed between them. "This is one truth," the elder woman said, her eyes still on Clara. "But it is a white man's truth. A piece of metal. It is not enough. Why are you here? You are running." "Yes," Clara admitted. "They hunt me. They put a price on my head. They are trying to frame me, not just for the dam, for everything." This was the moment. She reached into her waistband, passed her notebook, and pulled out a folded, oil-stained piece of paper. It was the map, the one showing the secret pipeline, the one with her initials, CR, on the dynamite requisition. "They are clever," she said, her voice bitter. "But I have another proof, not just of their guilt, but of mine, or the one they have made for me." She unfolded the map. "This is not what it seems. This is—" "Wait," Talon said. He took the paper from her. He looked at it, his eyes tracing the lines. He looked at the requisition. He looked at the initials. "I cannot read all your words," he said, "but I can read this." He pointed to a small, smudged fingerprint in the corner of a land transfer document attached to the map. It was a sale of a small plot of land directly over the spring, signed by a thumbprint and the name Mary B. Gay, a widow. "This," Clara said, "is a fraudulent purchase order for this land, signed by a dying widow." Talon held the paper closer to the firelight. A low, dangerous sound rumbled in his chest. "This is Hasteen Yazzie's sister-in-law." Talon said, "She has been dead for 2 winters. He pointed to the thumbprint. "And this is not a thumb. The ridges are too perfect. They are the same. It is a stamp, made of wood or metal. They have signed her name with a dead hand and a fake print." He looked up at the council. "They are not just stealing. They are mocking our dead." A deep, profound silence fell over the group. This was not a crime of metal. This was a crime of the soul. The elder woman looked at Clara, and for the first time, her gaze softened. "Just a fraction. You have brought a great burden to our fire, white woman. You bring the lies of your people, and you wear their guilt." "I know," Clara whispered. "And now," the woman continued, "you ask us to carry this burden with you, to protect you." I promise," Clara said, the words spilling out. "If I live." "If I get out of here, I will publish this, all of it. The detonator, the map, the forged signature. I will tell the world what they are doing. I will use my words to fight for you." Talon translated. Hasteen Yazzie spat into the fire. "Words," the old man said, and Talon did not need to translate the disgust. "Your words are wind. They blow east, to your other white men, who send more paper, more soldiers. It is the only weapon I have," Clara pleaded. "Then it is not a weapon," the old man said. "It is a child's toy." "Enough," Talon said, his voice cutting through the tension. He spoke to the elders. She is a fool. She is loud. She is a white woman, and she stumbles in the dark. But she has brought us the snake's rattle. She has shown us the shape of the lie. The town hunts her, but they hunt her because Vane fears her. He does not fear a child's toy. He fears her words. Maybe we have been fighting with stones when we should have been fighting with paper. He turned to the elder woman. Grandmother, I must get the families clear. To the high canyons. We must move now. But her, she is the target. Talin Begay, the elder woman said, her voice quiet but carrying. You were a scout. You wore the blue coats. You walked their path, and it stained your heart. You came back to us to protect the water. Now, you bring this pen into our circle. By bringing her here, you have made her our responsibility. Is this another white man's trap that you have walked us into? It was a blade, and it hit him. Clara saw him flinch. He was an outcast here. Too, a man caught between two worlds, trusted by neither. I am doing what I must to protect the water, he said, his voice flat. And to protect the children, Vane wants her. He wants her alive, to silence her. He wants me, to make an example. He will send Kestrel, and Kestrel will not care who is standing between her and her payday. As if he had summoned her. A sound ripped through the night. Crack! A single rifle shot. Not from the camp, from the valley below. It echoed, bouncing off the canyon walls. A sharp, metallic sound. Whump! Whine! A bullet screamed over their heads, punching into the rock face 100 feet above the camp. Talin threw Clara to the ground, covering her with his own body a split second before the rock chips rained down. A warning, he hissed, his face inches from hers, his voice tight with a sudden, cold fury. Kestrel's men, they are in the valley. They are closing the trap. They know we are here. He rolled off her, shouting and dying. The camp exploded into controlled, desperate action. Fires were kicked out. Children were grabbed. They want you alive, Talin said, pulling her to her feet. That shot was to pin us, to let us know they are here. May Kestrel. She is smart. She is bracketing us. Another shot, this one closer. We cannot go down, one of the men shouted to Talin. They are on the game trails. Then we go up, Talin said. To the narrow pass. Bring the torches. We move. Clara found herself running, a torch in her hand, part of a desperate, dark procession. She was surrounded by families, their faces lit by the flickering, hurried flames. They were leaving their homes, their possessions, everything because of her. The guilt was a physical sickness. She stumbled, and a hand grabbed her arm. It was the elder woman. You made a promise, white woman, the woman said, her voice surprisingly strong as she hauled Clara upright. You will keep it. Now, run! They were in a narrow, high-walled canyon. The only light came from their own 20 torches, casting huge, leaping shadows that made the rocks look like angry, watching giants. Talin, Clara panted, running beside him. Your people, they hate me. They think I am a curse. They hate what follows you. Talin corrected, not looking at her. They hate the railroad. They hate the lies. You are just the face of it tonight. There is a traitor, she said, the words tasting like ash. At my newspaper. Back east, someone is helping Vane. They set me up. They used my initials. He stopped for a second, looking at her, the torchlight catching the turquoise at his neck. Then you have no one, he said. Not your world, not ours. You have only your promise. I have to live to keep it, she said. Then keep running. They rounded a sharp bend, the pass narrowing. The air was cold, the stars sharp and indifferent above the slit of rock. And then, a new sound. Distant, not a gunshot, not a horse, a low, metallic wail, rising and falling. A sound that did not belong in these canyons. A sound of the other world. Woo! It was a steam whistle. It echoed, louder than the gunshots, louder than the wind. It was the sound of iron, of coal, of unstoppable, remorseless power. Clara froze. What is that? There are no tracks this high. Talon looked south, toward the gash the ATNDP was cutting through the territory. The sound was coming from there, from the main line, miles away, but in the cold night air, it sounded like it was in the next canyon. It is the night freight, he said, and his voice was grim. Vane's war horn. He has his excuse. He has his saboteurs. He has Kestrel in the hills. He pointed to the sound. That is the sound of the man who thinks he has already won. He is celebrating. He is telling the whole desert that this land, this water, is his. The whistle cried out again, a long, mournful, arrogant scream that defined the night. It was the sound of a new god, and it was demanding sacrifice. He is wrong, Clara said, her voice a ragged whisper. Talon looked at her, the torchlight dancing in her eyes, pupils wide with a mix of terror and something he had not seen there before, a cold, hard anger that matched his own. Prove it, he said, and turned to lead the way, deeper into the dark. The desert was a clean and terrible enemy. It did not lie. After Talon had led the Dine families into the high canyons, into a hidden pass he called the Eagle's Vein, which he promised the elder woman he would return to. He had come back for Clara. He had made a choice. The families, with the other men, would move slow and quiet. He and Clara would move fast and loud. You are the tinder, he had told her, his face a mask of stone in the moonlight. They hunt you. They will follow your scent, not the scent of my people. We will give them a trail to follow, a false one, and we will make them bleed for it. Now, 2 days later, Clara understood what he meant. They were not running from May Kestrel. They were leading her. They had doubled back, away from the high country, and down into the brutal, open-ended hell of the salt flats. Here, nature was not just a backdrop. It was a third person in their desperate party. The sun was a hammer. The world was a sheet of white, cracked earth that reflected the heat until Clara's eyes felt baked in her skull. There was no water. The water Talon had carried in a single skin was rationed by the sip, and it was hot and tasted of animal hide. The wind was a constant, screaming presence, not cooling them, but sand-blasting them, filling their mouths and lungs with alkali dust that burned. At night, the temperature plummeted. The cold was a living thing, a predator that stalked them the moment the sun died. They huddled in the shallow ditches Talon called arroyos, with no fire, the stars afrozen, indifferent spray of diamonds. Their journey found a terrible rhythm. Run, hide, run. The running was a stumbling, head down, breathless panting through the blinding sun. The hiding was worse. Twice, Talon heard them, or felt them. He would grab Clara, pulling her into a shadow of rock or a crack in the earth, and they would lie still for hours. Clara would feel her heart beating hard enough to betray them, the sound of her own blood roaring in her ears. She would watch a line of riders, dark specks in the distance, Kestrel's men, sweeping the horizon, patient as buzzards. In those long, hot, silent hours, the second part of their journey began, the small, grudging exchange of trust, on the first night of their flight, huddled in a cleft of rock. Clara had watched Talon. He was studying her map by the faint starlight. Your people hunt with paper, he said, his voice a low rumble. He tapped the map. This line, what does it mean right of way? Clara, her throat raw, had explained, it means they can take the land. For the railroad, it is a law. It is a law, he repeated. He did not say it like a question. He said it like a diagnosis. A law that says a line on paper is stronger than a family that has lived on the land for 1,000 winters. Yes, she whispered, ashamed. You teach me to read your ink signs, he said, handing her the paper. I will teach you to read the real ones. The next day, he had shown her. He knelt by a broken sprig of greasewood. They passed here, 3 riders. This morning, this branch is broken up, not down. A horse's hoof, moving fast. They are not looking, they are chasing. He showed her how to walk on stone, how to place her feet so she left no mark. She, in turn, explained the legal lies on the land transfer. She read him the fine print, translating the cold, dense language of the law into the simple, brutal truth of theft. He learned to read the ink signs with a scout's grim focus, recognizing the patterns of deceit as clearly as he recognized the track of a shod horse. They needed more. The detonator cap was not enough. The map was a plan, not a confession. Vane will say you forged the map, Talon said on the third morning, as they looked down from a ridge at the distant, smoking scar of Dust Mesa. He will say the cap was yours. We need the arrow that flew from his own bow. The blast, Clara said, her mind working, her journalistic instincts clicking back into place despite the thirst and fear. The soot, it was wrong. It was greasy, black, not like a wood fire. It smelled like the railroad. Talon finished for her, like the black stone they burn in the engine. Cheol, coal, from their own mine. She breathed. They used their own fuel to set the charge. If I could get a sample? It was a madness born of desperation. They circled back, a 2-day journey made in 12 hours, moving through the night. They returned to the scene of the dam's explosion, a place that was now guarded. Talon left her in the rocks. I will be the coyote, he said. I will draw the dogs. She waited, her heart in her throat. A half hour later, a single shot cracked, far to the north of the dam. Then another, and shouting, Talon creating a diversion, drawing the 2 bored guards away in a pointless chase. Clara ran. She slid down the bank, her feet landing in the same mud she had fled days before. The area was a wreck, and there, half buried, was the splintered ruin of her camera box. She tore it open. The glass plates were shattered, all but one, a single, precious, intact plate. She ignored it. She ran to the largest piece of blasted lumber, the soot thick and oily on its splinters. She scraped a handful of the black, greasy ash into her handkerchief. Then she saw it. Lying in the mud, miraculously unbroken, was one of her amber elixir bottles. She dumped the useless sugar water, packed the ash sample inside, and corked it tightly. She buried the bottle in her skirt pocket, a small, hard lump of truth. She scrambled back, melting into the shadows just as the guards returned, cursing the darkness and the phantom that had lured them away. They were deep in enemy territory now. They needed help. Talon had a friend. Ashki Yazi, Talon said, as they made their way south. He is dying, but he walks the iron path. He works for the Atlantic and Pacific Consolidated. He lays the track. He knows the schedules. He knows their weakness. He works for Vane. Clara was horrified. He is a traitor. He is a survivor. Talon corrected, his voice sharp. He feeds his family, and he watches. He is my eyes inside the beast. They also needed a safe place, a place to rest. Doña Marisol, he said. She runs the cantina at the border crossing. She listens to the teamsters, the soldiers, the whores, the outlaws. Her floor is the territory's newspaper. Kestrel's men will be there, but they will not find you. He sent Clara first. It was too dangerous for them to travel together. He gave her a small, smooth river stone. Give this to her. Say nothing else. Clara walked into the dusty, sun-bleached border town alone. She had pulled her hair down, smeared dust on her face, and tried to look like any other half-starved woman drifting through. The cantina was loud, smelling of stale beer and desperation, and she saw it, nailed to the wall. Right next to the door, a new poster, fresh, the ink still dark. It was not the unknown female saboteur. It was her name, Clara Reed. It described her, her height, her hair, her eyes. $500. Alive. She felt the air in the cantina change. She was not a customer. She was a resource. The man at the bar, who had glanced at her with casual disinterest, now looked again. His eyes narrowed. He looked at the poster. He looked at her. He was doing the math. She walked straight to the bar, to the large, unsmiling woman behind it. Doña Marisol, She was wiping a glass, her face a mask of calm. Clara put the smooth river stone on the wet bar. Doña Marisol did not look at it. She did not look at Clara. She finished wiping the glass. Then her hand, large and capable, closed over the stone and swept it away. "Kitchen needs help," the woman said, her voice flat. "Back door." Clara walked, her legs shaking, through the bar, past the staring men, and pushed through the curtain to the kitchen. Marisol found her there an hour later, hiding in a dark pantry. Shaking. The woman said nothing. She handed Clara a bowl of stew and a piece of bread. Clara ate, the first real food in days, and the terror began to recede, replaced by a cold, hollowing guilt. She heard the men in the bar. They were forming a posse, not to hunt Dine, to hunt her. For the $500. "I heard Kestrel's paying in gold. $500 for that little bird, I'd do it for 50. She was the reason. She was the excuse. The poster had been May Kestrel's masterstroke, not an act of war, but an appeal to greed. She had turned every citizen in the territory into a bounty hunter. Clara stood, the half-eaten stew in her hand. If she walked out there, if she gave herself up, would it stop? Would Kestrel call off her men? Would Vane, his saboteur captured, leave the Dine in peace? She moved to the door. It was a simple choice. Her life, her one small, failed life, for the lives of all those families in the high canyons. The back door opened. Talon slipped in. A ghost. He saw her, her hand on the latch, her face a mask of terrible, resolved sacrifice. "You are still here," he said. It was not a question. It was a statement of relief so profound it was almost a prayer. I was going to turn myself in," she whispered, ashamed. "Good," he said, taking the bowl from her trembling hands. "You thought about it. You saw the choice, and you waited. That is good. Waiting is harder. Talon, they are hunting me, for money. I am the reason. You are the excuse," he said, his voice hard. "You are not the reason. The reason is the water, the silver, the land. Do not give them the victory of your guilt. Ashki has talked. He knows the route. Vane is moving something important, on a special train. Tonight." He pulled her away from the door. "We leave now. We must cross the canyon before the moon is high. There is a trestle." It was a skeleton of wood, a high railroad bridge that crossed a 200-foot drop. They were halfway across, the wind whistling through the beams, the ground a dark, distant memory below. The moon was a sliver, but it was enough. Crack! The sound was sharp, definitive. The bullet, traveling from a high ridge a half-mile away, slammed into a support piling not 5 inches from Clara's head. The entire bridge shuddered. Wood splintered and rained down into the darkness. "A sniper! He is cutting the bridge!" Talon roared, grabbing her arm. The sniper fired again. A precise, calculated shot. The bullet struck the same support. Lower down. The wood screamed. The section of trackway beneath Clara's feet groaned and lurched, tilting at a sick angle. She screamed, falling, grabbing at a heavy rail tie as the walkway gave way. Her feet swung out over 200 feet of empty, black air. She was hanging, her arms already burning, her camera box and the precious vial of ash banging against her. "I cannot. I am slipping." The sniper was reloading. He had all the time in the world. Talon was on the stable section of the bridge, 10 feet away. He looked at her. He looked at the dark ridge where the sniper was. He did not hesitate. He ran onto the collapsing, groaning section of the bridge. He grabbed her wrists, his grip a band of steel. "You are not," he grunted. He hauled her up with a single powerful surge of muscle. The sniper fired again. The shot was aimed at him. The bullet ripped through the air with a wet, heavy thwack. Talon grunted, his body stiffening in pain, but his hands did not loosen. He threw her, bodily, forward onto the stable ground of the main trestle. He scrambled after her, his left arm hanging useless. The bullet had passed clean through the fleshy muscle of his upper arm. He fell onto the planks beside her, just as the entire section of the bridge they had been on tore free from its moorings and crashed, in a thunderous avalanche of wood and iron, into the canyon below. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind and Clara's ragged, sobbing breaths. Talon pushed himself to his knees, his face pale in the moonlight. His hand clamped over the wound. Blood, black and hot, pumped between his fingers. My God, you are hit," she stammered. He looked at his arm, then at the ridge. "He was a good shot," he said, his voice tight, breathless. But he was slow. He grabbed her good arm, pulling her to her feet. "Come, we are still the prey, and now we are bleeding." He pulled her into the darkness, and they ran. He did not let her see the pain, not at first. For the first mile, he was a machine, his good arm pulling her forward, his legs eating the rough ground as he led her away from the ruined trestle. But Clara felt the heat of him, a radiating wet heat that was not just exertion. She heard the change in his breathing, a slight catch, a sound just under the whistle of the wind. He was bleeding. He was bleeding badly. "We have to stop, Talon," she said, her voice shaking. "Your arm, I have to bind it." "We stop, we die," he grunted, but his pace slowed. He was leaning, just slightly. "Kestrel's man will be down from that ridge. He will find our tracks. He will find us by the trail of blood you are leaving." She shot back, her fear making her sharp. "There, in the rocks." She pointed to a dark jumble of boulders. He did not argue. He stumbled, falling to his knees in the shadows. Clara ripped a long, clean strip from her petticoat, her hands clumsy. "Let me see," she commanded, her voice sounding thin. He pulled his hand away from the wound. It was black and wet in the moonlight. The bullet had gone clean through, a hole in the front and a larger, ragged exit wound in the back. It was not a mortal wound, not if it was treated. But they were in the middle of the desert. "You are a medicine woman," he said, his voice tight with a pain he could no longer hide. "Do your work." "I am not," she whispered, her hands shaking as she tried to wrap the cloth. I do not know what I am doing." The cloth was instantly soaked. "You are here," he said, his eyes closing for a moment. "That is enough." He looked up, past her, to the north. "There, 1 mile, a hogan. Shiyazi. She will be there." He got to his feet. Clara put her shoulder under his good arm, taking his weight. The man who had been a force of nature, a part of the stone and wind, was now just a man, heavy and bleeding, leaning on her. The shift in the world, in their world, was a physical weight. They reached the hogan as the first pale. Gray light of dawn touched the eastern sky. It was set deep into a fold of the earth, invisible until they were upon it. The elder woman from the council fire, the one who had told Clara to run, was there. She was Shiyazi. She was not surprised. She saw Talon, saw the blood-soaked ruin of his sleeve, and her face, a map of ancient lines, tightened. "He has brought the white woman's war to my door," she said in English, her voice like gravel. But she was already moving, pulling back the blanket over the doorway. "Bring him in, lay him by the fire." They got him inside. Clara, exhausted, almost dropped him onto the sheepskins. Shiyazi was already at work. She cut the sleeve away with a sharp knife, her movements economical and certain. She clicked her tongue at the wound. "It is bad. The bullet was hot. It has cooked the meat." "It needs to be cleaned," Clara said, falling back on the one thing she knew. "Boiled water, soap, if you have it." Shiyazi looked at her with a profound, almost pitying look. "Your water and soap are for the outside. This wound is from the inside." She moved to the back of the hogan, where bundles of dried herbs hung from the ceiling. She took down 3, her fingers knowing their texture in the dark. She crushed them, and the air filled with the sharp, clean scents of sage and something Clara did not know, something deep and earthy. By noon, the fever had come. Talon was no longer the stone-faced scout. He was a man lost, his body burning. He thrashed, his good arm pushing Clara away. He was muttering. Not in Dine, in English. Hold the line. Blue coats, hold the line. Sir, they are. There are no... God, they are children! Clara tried to put a wet cloth on his head, but he pushed it away. Shir Yazi returned. She had a small, smoldering bundle of herbs in her hand. She did not look at Clara. She knelt by Talon, and she began to chant, a low, single-note song that was not a prayer, but a centering. She passed the smoking bundle of herbs over his body, the smoke thick and gray, washing over him. She did it 4 times, from his head to his feet, and again over the wound. "What is that?" Clara asked, her voice hushed. "Is that magic?" Shir Yazi looked up, her eyes flat. "It is smoke. It calms the spirit. It cleans the air." She then took a dark, thick paste she had made from the herbs and, ignoring Talon's groan, packed it directly into the entry and exit wounds. "This is for the flesh. The earth heals what the earth knows. Your medicine is for a world that is already sick. This is for a man who is strong." She sat back, and the song ended. "Now, we wait. The fever will break, or he will be taken." Clara waited. For 2 days, she sat by the fire, keeping it low, bringing water Shir Yazi showed her how to find in a rock seep, and watching Talon fight. In the long hours of the second night, with Talon sleeping, a quieter sleep, Clara finally unburdened her own pockets. She sat by the weak firelight and laid her treasures on the packed earth floor. The detonator cap, the map, stained and torn, with the faked thumbprint, and the small amber bottle, corked tight, holding the greasy black ash. It was the case. It was the whole story. Shir Yazi came and sat opposite her. She looked at the items. She pointed to the map. "That is the line of the metal snake." She said, "The pipeline." Clara nodded. "It leads to Vein Silver Mine." The old woman's finger traced the line on the paper. She tapped a spot. "Here, this is where Hastine TSO lived. A good man. He raised sheep. He sold his land to the railroad 2 months ago, for $100. Her finger moved down the line. "And here, this is where the widow Kinlichini lived. Her children were hungry. She sold her land for $50. Clara's blood went cold. She looked at the map. The pipeline did not go near those farms. It went through them. They were not voluntary sales. Clara whispered, the pieces clicking together. They were not buying farms. They were clearing a path. They forced them out. They took the land for the pipeline. They took the water. Shir Yazi corrected. The land is nothing. The water is life. They are stealing the life and paying for the dust. Clara looked at the forged thumbprint of the dead woman. Mary B. Gay. It was not one theft. It was a chain of them. 100 small, legal, brutal crimes, all leading to the one big one. On the third morning, the fever broke. Talon woke, his eyes clear but hollowed by pain and exhaustion. He saw Clara, and then he saw Shir Yazi. My thanks, grandmother, he said, his voice a dry rasp. Do not thank me, she said, handing him a bowl of thin broth. Thank her. She did not run. She has sat like a stone, watching you. Talon looked at Clara. The silence was heavy, filled with the things they had seen, the fall from the trestle, his wound, her terror. He drank, the broth giving him a small surge of life. He sat up, wincing. I talked, he said. It was not a question. Clara nodded. You were a scout. He looked down at his bandaged arm. I wore the blue coat. I thought I could teach them. I thought I could be a bridge. I showed them the trails. I showed them the secret places, and they used me. They used my eyes to find women and children. The order was to pacify the ridge. I led them. I followed the order. I heard it, and I obeyed. The shadows they fired on. They were our people, hiding, my own people. His voice broke. Just for a second. I have been washing the blood off my hands ever since. This water. Protecting to be. It is the only way I know to make it right, to atone. He had given her his deepest shame. Clara felt the weight of it, the terrible, burning honesty. She could not meet it with silence. "We all have them," she said, her voice low. "The ghosts, the orders we followed." He looked at her, confused. "I am not just a tincture woman. Talon, I'm a journalist, or I was. My first big story. Back east. There was a fire in a tenement building. A bad one. 20 people died. Immigrants, Irish. I was ambitious. I was fast. I did not check. I listened to the whispers, the rumors. The landlord said it was the tenants. Their dirty habits. Their strange cooking. I wrote it. I wrote that they were a danger to themselves, that their foreign ways had killed them." She stared into the fire, seeing not the flames, but the faces. "The paper printed it. The city used my story. They cleaned up the neighborhood. They condemned the buildings. They deported hundreds of families. They sent them back with nothing. Because of me, because I was lazy. And I was afraid to be poor. So I stepped on them to get ahead." She looked at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I ran, too, Talon. I ran out here, to the middle of nowhere, to write small, harmless stories. But this, Vane, the railroad, it is the same. It is the same lie, just with a different face. I have to stop it. Not for my newspaper. For them. For the ones I failed." He held her gaze. The gulf between them, the man of the desert and the woman of the city, had vanished. All that was left were two people, bound by a shared, desperate need for redemption. "So," he said, his voice quiet, "we are two ghosts, then, trying to save the living." The blanket door was pushed aside. A new figure slipped in, shaking dust from his shoulders. It was Ashki Yazi, the man Talon had called his eyes. He was younger, his face sharp and worried. He saw Talon, and relief washed over him. "You are alive. I heard. Kestrel's men are bragging in town. They said they shot you off the trestle." "They missed," Talon said, his voice hard. "Not by much," Ashki said, his eyes on the bandage. He turned to Clara. "And you are Clara Reed, the $500 woman." "What is happening?" Ashki, Talon asked. "It is worse. Vane is not waiting. And Kestrel, this is not just a payday for her. Talon, the Gazette in Santa Fe, Vane's paper, ran a story. They are calling her the Angel of the Arizona line. They say she is ending the water war. She is a hero. She likes the taste of it. She is not hunting you for money. Clara, she is hunting you for fame. She will not stop." Clara's stomach turned to ice. She had created a monster. "And Vane?" Talon asked. "He is at the San Alvarado depot. He is preparing a special train. He is loading files, boxes of them. He is cleaning house." Clara stood up. "The files, the land transfers, the forged documents." She looked at Talon. "He is hiding the evidence." "Worse," Ashki said. "He is making it legal. I saw the light in the office. He is stamping them, all of them, with the big official corporate seal, the one they keep in the safe. He is not hiding the forgeries. He is making the forgeries. Official." Clara looked at Talon. This was it, the linchpin. "Talon," she said, her voice urgent. "That seal, the stamp, that is the proof. If we have the fake thumbprint, and the stamp they used to make it legal, we have him. We have the whole company." "The depot is a fortress," Ashki said. 20 guards, at least. We cannot go in. We cannot." Talon agreed. He pushed himself to his feet, his hand on his wounded arm, a cold, hard light in his eyes. "We cannot fight 20 men." He walked to the Hogan door, pushing the blanket aside. The wind had changed. It was no longer a breeze. It was a high, thin whine. The sky was no longer blue. It was a sickly, churning yellow. "A storm," Talon said, tasting the air. "A real one. It will be here by dark." Clara and Ashki stood beside him, the first grains of sand, moving faster than a running horse, stung their faces. "We cannot fight 20 men," Talon repeated, a grim smile touching his lips. "So we will not. We will let the sky fight them for us. The dust storm. Clara breathed. It will blind them. It will blind everyone, Ashki said, his voice full of doubt. It is a suicide run. No, Talon said, turning to them, his eyes holding them both. It is a raid. We are not stealing gold. We are not trying to hurt anyone. He looked at Clara. You fight with paper. You showed me that, so we will fight paper. He clapped his good hand on Ashki's shoulder. You know the depot. You know the guard's rotation. You know where the office is. He looked at Clara. You know the files. You know the seal. And he tapped his own chest. And I know the storm. We go tonight. We steal the truth. The wind howled, a rising scream, and the first great yellow wall of dust rolled over the horizon, coming to swallow the world. The San Alvarado depot was not a fortress. It was a scar, a collection of raw lumber buildings and iron tracks squatting under a sky that had turned to a screaming, yellow poison. The wind was a solid moving wall. A man could not stand upright in it. He could not see 10 feet. He could not hear a gunshot in the next yard. It was the perfect cover. Ashki Yazi went first. He was a railroad man, and he looked it. He carried a heavy storm-proof lantern and a coil of rope. Walking bent against the wind, his head down, he moved toward the main switch, his official, stated purpose to check the lines before the storm tore them apart. He was the lure. He would draw the guards on the east side, pulling them into a pointless, blind argument about procedure. Talon and Clara waited. The air was so thick with sand it was like breathing wool. Now, Talon said. His voice was gone, stolen by the wind. She only saw his lips move. He moved, not toward the office, but around it, a ghost in the yellow haze. His wounded arm was bound tight to his chest, his good hand holding his knife. Clara had a different task. Ashki had shown her the weak point. Not a door, not a window, a ventilation shaft, used for the telegraph batteries, set low to the ground behind a stack of water barrels. She squeezed into the darkness, her body scraping against the metal. It was a tight, suffocating fit. She dropped into a small, dark room, landing on a pile of canvas. The air was still, and the sudden silence was terrifying. She could hear the storm, but as a muffled, roaring giant, a beast trying to get in. This was the records room, the heart of the beast. It was not neat. Silas Vane, in his haste, had left a ruin. Files were piled on the desk, ledgers were open, and an empty whiskey bottle stood near a guttering oil lamp. The wind was forcing its way through the window frames, making the lamp flicker, casting huge, leaping shadows. And there, on the desk, was the safe, a small, black, ugly block of iron. 1873, she whispered, her fingers numb with a mixture of cold and fear. Ashki had known. The year Vane's progress had officially been chartered. Her fingers spun the dial. Right, left, right. The tumblers clicked, a heavy, beautiful, final sound. She pulled the iron handle. Inside, not gold, not guns, paper, stacks of it, land titles, water rights, and, at the bottom, a small, velvet-lined box. She opened it. The corporate seal, a heavy, intricate piece of brass, capable of turning a lie into a legal fact. She grabbed it all. She did not sort. She did not read. She shoved the stacks of paper, the ledgers, and the heavy seal into a worn leather satchel she found on the floor. She had it. She had the entire case. She was turning to leave when the door to the office flew open. Clara screamed, dropping the sachet. It was not Vane. It was May Kestrel. The woman was not what Clara had expected. She was not a brute. She was lean, dressed in practical men's trousers and a long duster. Her hair pulled back in a tight, merciless bun. Her face was sharp, intelligent, and utterly calm. The storm raged outside. But she looked as if she were in a drawing room. She held a revolver in her hand, and it was not pointed at Clara. It was pointed at her own hip, held with a casual, patient readiness. "So," May Kestrel said, her voice surprisingly low and clear over the wind, "you are the $500 woman. I have to say, I'm a little disappointed." Clara's mind was a blank, white sheet of terror. "Give me the bag, Miss Reed," May said. She had not raised her voice. I know what you are," May continued, taking a step into the room. "I have read your articles, the ones from back east. The tenement fire. You are very good at destroying things. And Mr. Vane, he has built a great many things." May's eyes were not on Clara. They were on the satchel and the files spilling from it, and in her eyes. Clara did not see greed. She saw understanding. "You are not a saboteur, are you?" "Miss Reed," May said, her voice a near whisper. "You are a journalist. You have just found the story of your life, and you have just realized. You are the only one who can tell it. They are lies," Clara stammered, finding her voice. "The titles, the dam, it is all a fraud. It is the frontier." "Miss Reed," May said, a thin, cold smile touching her lips, "the entire thing is a fraud. We are just the ones who know how to sign the paperwork." She took another step. "I am not here for Mr. Vane's papers. I am here for you. You are my bounty. But that," she nodded at the satchel, "that is my legend. The angel of the Arizona line. The woman who saved the railroad." A shot cracked, muffled by the storm, but close. May's head snapped toward the door. "My men!" Talon. The diversion was over, and then the world was torn in half. It was not a sound. It was a feeling. A violent, white-hot crack that shook the building to its foundation. The oil lamp exploded. The room was plunged into total darkness, and the air was filled with the smell of ozone and wet, burning wood. The lightning had struck the water tower. The wall behind May Kestrel vanished. Not in an explosion, but in a tidal wave, a wall of splintered wood, scalding water, and fire-stoked steam ripped through the office. May was thrown, screaming, as the deluge hit her. Clara was saved by the heavy desk. The water, a foot deep and boiling hot, surged around her ankles, and then was gone, sucked back out into the night. Chaos. The depot was a ruin of steam, screaming wind, and new, hungry fires. Clara grabbed the satchel. She ran out into a world of pure hell. The yard was on fire. The storm was feeding the flames, creating a vortex of smoke and embers. She saw figures, shouting, "Talon!" He was fighting. He had his knife, and he was a demon. His wounded arm a liability, but his good arm a blur. He had taken down one guard and was fighting another. Then she saw Ashki. He was not with Talon. He was on the ground, and 3 of May Kestrel's men were on him, binding his hands. He was captured. Clara and Talon were near the fence. They were almost free. They looked back at the same instant. They saw May Kestrel, pulling herself from the wreckage, her face a mask of mud and fury. She saw her men. She saw Ashki. She pointed, and they saw Talon and Clara. "Go!" Talon roared, shoving Clara toward the hole in the fence. "Run!" He had the choice. The proof in her hands, or his friend. He chose his friend. "Ashki!" he bellowed, and he turned, running back into the burning, chaotic yard. He was running, one-armed, knife in hand, toward May Kestrel and her 3 armed men. It was not a rescue, it was suicide. Clara stood at the fence line, the satchel in her hand, the proof, the story, the rest of her life. Everything she had worked for, everyone she had failed, was in this bag. She watched Talon run. He was 10 yards away. He was not going to make it 20. She screamed his name, but the storm ate it. She had to choose, the man or the mission. She made her choice. She ran, not to the fence, not to safety. She ran after him. She caught him at the edge of the burning platform, grabbing the back of his shirt. He spun, his face a mask of fury. "I told you, I choose you," she screamed, her voice breaking. The words ripped from her throat. She shoved the heavy satchel into his good hand. "I choose you first, then the article." He was stunned. He was holding the files. His friend was a prisoner. And this woman, this insane woman, had just followed him into hell. She had chosen him over her own life's work. Before he could speak, a voice screamed from across the yard. "Talon, go! Tell them go!" It was Ashki. He was on his feet, fighting his captors. A wild, desperate, final act. He was buying them seconds. Talon looked at his friend. He looked at Clara, her face streaked with soot, her eyes burning with a terrible, fierce light. He looked at the satchel in his hand. The choice was made, not by him, by them. "Come," he said, his voice a broken thing. He grabbed her hand, and this time, he did not pull her. They ran together, side by side, away from the fire, away from the depot. They plunged through the hole in the fence and into the screaming, blind mercy of the storm, leaving his friend and their honor behind. They collapsed a mile later, in a deep, dry wash, the roar of the depot fire a faint echo behind them. Talon was a broken man. He was on his knees, his head down, the satchel on the ground. "I left him?" he whispered. Clara, her lungs aching, her body a mass of bruises, knelt in front of him. "He left us," she said, her voice shaking. "He chose. He bought this." She put her hand on the satchel. Talon said nothing. He was a man hollowed out. They did not know that. Back at the depot, Silas Vane was walking through the wreckage. May Kestrel met him. "They are gone," she said, her voice flat. "The woman, the dine, they have the files, they have the seal." "I know," Vane said. He was not angry, but, May said, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. She gestured, and her men threw Ashki Yazi to the ground at Vane's feet. "We have the bait." Vane looked down at the beaten, bound man. He looked at the main line, where a single, powerful locomotive was being steamed up, a single passenger car attached. "An excellent night's work, Miss Kestrel," Vane said. "Put him on the 10 o'clock special. Send a rider. Let the town know the saboteur is being taken to the federal marshal. His friends will hear of it. And Mr. Be gay. He will not let his friend be taken." The trap had not broken. It had just been reset. The storm died as quickly as it had been born, leaving the world scoured and cold. The fire at the depot was a dull, angry red smear against the eastern sky, a wound that matched the one in Talon's soul. He had led them, not to safety, but to a narrow, high cleft in the rocks 2 miles from the depot, a place where the wind had a different voice, a high, mournful cry that echoed his own grief. He sank to the ground, his back against the stone. He did not look at the satchel. He did not look at Clara. He only looked at his own hands, one of them dark with his friend's blood, the other his own. "I left him," he said again. The words were flat, dead. "Stop," Clara said. She was shaking, her body a map of new bruises, her dress in ruins. You cannot do this now. Ashki, he chose. He gave us this chance. He gave me this chance," Talon said, his voice rough. "And I ran. We ran," she corrected, her voice fierce. "We ran together, and now we are here, and he is in Vane's hands." The wound in his arm, torn open again during the fight and the escape, was weeping blood. "You are bleeding," she said, her tone shifting from anger to a flat, weary practicality. "Again, let me see it." She tore another strip from her ruined petticoat, the last of it. She knelt in front of him. The space between them was small, a few inches of cold air. She did not ask for permission, but her hands were gentle as she unwrapped the blood-soaked bandage. The wound was raw, the flesh torn. It is bad. Talon, I have had worse," he said, but he hissed in pain as she began to clean it with the last of the water from their skin. "We need a plan," she said, her voice a low whisper, her hands busy. We cannot just let them take him." "He is gone," Talon said. His eyes closed. "Vane has him. Kestrel has him. It is over." No, it is not. A pebble skittered in the darkness at the mouth of the cleft. Talon was on his feet in an instant, his good hand on his knife, pulling Clara behind him. He was a wounded animal, but he was still a predator. Doña Marisol sends her regrets, a voice said. A small boy, no older than 12, stepped into the shadow. It was the runner from the cantina. You are a fool to be here. Talon growled. And you are a fool to be alive, the boy retorted, unafraid. She sent me. The news is all over town. Vane has the saboteur, Ashki. He's putting him on a special train, the 10 o'clock, taking him to the federal marshal in Santa Fe. Clara looked at Talon. His face was granite. It is a lie. Talon said, Of course it is a lie, the boy said, impatient. But it is the one they are telling. The train is at the depot. Vane and Kestrel are both going. They are calling it the prisoner transfer. The town is excited. They think the war is over. The boy looked at Clara, his eyes wide in the dark. They are all saying your name, Clara Reed. They say you are the one who planned it all. When does it leave? Talon asked. 10 o'clock, the boy said. Or maybe sooner. The engine is already hot. Marisol. She will have horses. At the old quarry switch. If you can get there. If you are that kind of fool. The boy was gone, melting back into the night. Clara and Talon were alone. The trap was clear. It was precise. It was perfect. He will not get to Santa Fe, Talon said, his voice flat. Vane will not risk a trial. He will not risk Ashki talking. There will be an accident, an escape attempt. A single bullet, a mile out of town. He knows you will come for him. Clara whispered, I know. He sat back down, the strength, the anger, all of it leaving him. He looked at his wounded arm. I am not the man I was this morning. He said, I cannot fight. I cannot. Then we do not fight, Clara said. She sat beside him, close, their shoulders almost touching. The cold was a physical thing, pushing them together. We think Ashki. He was a track layer. He knows the lines. What did he tell you? Talon was silent for a long moment, his mind working, pulling back from the brink of his grief. He told me, Vane is afraid of the main line. He's afraid of the other railroads. He runs his secret trains, his silver, his stolen supplies, on the old spur lines. The spur lines, Clara said. The map. Ashki marked a spur line, near the quarry. He said it was rotten. The quarry switch, Talon said, a new, cold light in his eyes. The tracks they are not secure. They lead to a dead end, to the rock face. Can you? I can, he said, with the right tool. I can switch the track. Vane's special train will not go to Santa Fe. It will go into a rock wall. The plan was brutal, simple. But Ashki, Clara said, her stomach twisting. He is on the train. We get him off. Talon said, how it will be moving. It will be guarded by May Kestrel. It has to pass the aqueduct. Talon said, his mind racing. The old Spanish stone. It runs low over the tracks, before the quarry switch. Clara pictured it. How low? 20 feet, he said. Maybe 30. It is. It is a jump. I will jump, she said. He turned, his face a mask of disbelief. You are a writer, a woman from the East. You cannot. I can, she said, her voice hard, trying to convince herself. I will get on the roof. I will find him. You switch the track. You give me, how much time? 5 minutes, he said. From the aqueduct to the switch, maybe less. You will have 5 minutes to get on, find him, and get off. Before I send them all to hell, we need horses, she said. The boy, Marisol. The horses will be at the quarry if we live to find them. The plan hung in the air, a thing of pure, desperate madness. Clara began to shake. It was not the cold. It was the vast, terrible weight of the choice. The image of the black, moving train, the 30-foot drop, the fire. I'm afraid, she whispered, her voice so low it was almost lost in the wind. Talon, I have never been this afraid. He did not answer. He just watched her, his gaze steady. This is not your fight, he said, his voice low. You have the papers. You have the seal. He nodded at the satchel. You can take that, and you can go, run, back to the east. Write your story. You have won. I have won nothing, she said, her voice ragged. I have a bag of paper. And you have lost a friend. No, we chose this. You said it. We are two ghosts. We are trying to save the living. She looked at him. I am tired of running. Talon, I am tired of being the excuse. I am tired of my own ghosts. I will not leave another man to die because I was afraid. She put her hand on his good arm. I will not leave you. He looked down at her hand. It was small, streaked with his blood and the soot of the fire. He covered it with his own. His skin was rough, calloused, but his touch was surprisingly light. We choose this together, then, he said. We choose to stand against the wrong of my world and the wrong of yours. He turned his hand, his fingers lacing with hers. It was an anchor in the dark. He raised her hand, his gaze holding hers. He saw the small, white scar on her palm she had told him about. He lifted her hand, slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, and he pressed his lips to the scar. It was not a kiss. It was an oath. She leaned toward him, her body trembling. He saw the question in her eyes. He saw the fear, and he saw, beneath it, a strength that matched his own. He leaned in, closing the last few inches. He kissed her. It was a deep, slow kiss. It was not a kiss of passion. It was not a kiss of love, as the poets wrote of it. It was a kiss of shared endings, of a desperate final alliance. It tasted of dust and fear, and the metallic tang of blood. It was a promise to die together, or to live. She pulled back, just an inch, her forehead resting against his. Her breath was a ragged sob. Hold me, she whispered. The wind was a scream around them. Hold me, gently. A small, pained smile touched his lips. He moved his good arm, wrapping it around her, pulling her close. His wounded arm stayed at his side, a fiery, useless weight. I will not claim you, Clara Reed, he whispered, his lips against her hair. I will not bind you. He kissed her forehead. Everything is your choice. He held her, and for a long moment, there was no train, there was no vein, there was only the shelter of a rock wall and the solid, living warmth of two people. Finally, no longer alone, he pulled back. From his own neck, he unfastened the leather thong, the heavy, dark turquoise stone. It was cool to the touch. Shiyazi, he said, told me this is the stone of the sky. It protects the wearer from falls. He pressed it into her hand. Her fingers closed around it. It was heavy, real. It is not a chain, he said, his eyes holding hers. It is a shield, for your choice, for the jump. I will bring it back to you, she said, her voice thick. No, he said, you will bring yourself back. The moment was shattered. A sound, a low, metallic wail, cutting through the wind. Woo! The train. It was early. They were on their feet in a single, shared movement. The tenderness was gone, replaced by a cold, hard purpose, the warrior and the journalist. He is moving, Talon said, his voice grim. He is starting his clock. Clara shoved the turquoise deep into her pocket. It felt like a stone. It felt like a heart. She grabbed the satchel. Then we start ours. They looked at each other. One last, shared breath in the dark. To the aqueduct, Talon said, Run. They plunged out of the cleft, back into the cold, hostile night, running, side by side, toward the sound of the iron beast. The aqueduct stood against the stars, a black, skeletal bridge of ancient stone. Clara stood at its highest point, 30 feet above the iron tracks, the wind tearing at her hair. The turquoise in her pocket was a cold, heavy weight. She held the satchel of papers. She also held the heavy iron pry bar Talon had pressed into her hand. For the lock, he had said. He was gone. He had taken one of the horses the boy from the cantina had led to them, a fast, lean shadow of a beast. Marisol's best, the boy had said. Talon was already riding, a ghost in the darkness, to the quarry switch. He had 5 minutes, maybe less, to ride 2 miles, throw the switch, and ride back. It was impossible. She heard it before she saw it, a low, chugging thunder, growing from the east. A single, bright eye cut the darkness. Vane's special. It was coming. It was fast. She saw a flicker of movement on the ridge opposite. A horse, running parallel to the track. Talon. He had done it. He had thrown the switch. And now, he was racing the train. The engine screamed underneath her. The blast of hot steam and cinders was a physical blow. She did not hesitate. As the passenger car, a single, dark box, shot into view, she gripped the pry bar, held her breath, and jumped. She hit the roof of the car with a force that drove the air from her lungs. Her body skidded, her hands and knees tearing on the rough metal. She slammed against a ventilation hatch, her grip on the satchel the only thing that kept it from flying into the darkness. She was alive. She heard a shout from the track beside her. Talon. He was riding the horse like a man born in the saddle, his face a mask of furious concentration. He was pulling abreast of the last car, the passenger car. The horse was at a full gallop, its hooves thunderous, matching the rhythm of the wheels. He spurred the animal, one last desperate surge. He gained on the rear platform. He rose in the stirrups, his good arm outstretched. He grabbed the iron railing, left the saddle, and swung his body over the void. His boots hit the platform with a heavy, solid crash. He was on 2. He did not pause. He jammed his knife into the wooden door of the car and ran, climbing the ladder to the roof, where he saw her. He helped her to her feet. "The tender," he yelled over the roar of the wind and the engine. "May will be there." He moved forward, a low crouch, his wounded arm held tight to his body. Clara, clutching the satchel, followed him. They jumped the gap, landing in the shifting, treacherous pile of coal in the tender. A figure rose from the shadows by the engine. May Kestrel. She was not smiling. She held a heavy steel shovel, not a gun. "I was wondering when you would arrive. Mr. Begay," she shouted. "And you brought the $500 prize with you. He is leaving you." "May," Talon yelled, his knife in his good hand, "Vane is leaving us all to die. He is paying me," she spat, and she swung the shovel. Talon ducked, the heavy iron whistling past his head. He lunged, his one arm surprisingly strong. Grabbing her wrist, they fell into the coal. A brutal, rolling fight. May was strong, a brawler, driving her fists into his wounded side. Talon grunted in pain, trying to bring the knife to bear. In the engine cab, Silas Vane looked back. He saw the struggle on the tender. He saw the forms on his train that should not be there. "Faster!" he screamed at the engineer, his voice a panicked shriek. "Push it! Push it to the quarry! They are on the tender! Grind them off!" The train lurched, the engine surging as the engineer threw the throttle wide. The acceleration slammed Clara against the tender wall. Talon and May were thrown against the back of the engine cab, the fight turning into a desperate, clinging grapple. Clara knew she could not help him. Not in this fight. She had her own... Ashki. She crawled back over the coal, jumped the gap to the passenger car, and found the roof hatch. It was bolted. She jammed the pry bar under the lip. The train swayed, trying to throw her into the night. She put her entire weight on the bar. The wood splintered. The metal groaned. The hatch flew open. She dropped into the car. It was chaos. Ashki was there, chained to a steel post in the center. 2 of Kestrel's men, railroad bulls, were trying to get the door open, to join the fight. "It is the woman!" one yelled. Seeing her, he lunged. Clara did not think. She swung the heavy pry bar in a low, vicious arc. The iron met his knee with a wet, heavy crack. The man screamed and went down. The other guard raised his rifle. "No!" a voice screamed. From the end of the car, Clara saw a small, tin megaphone on a shelf. She had seconds. She grabbed it. She smashed the window with the pry bar. They were passing a small way station. A cluster of shacks and a water tower. Men, railroad workers, were standing outside, drawn by the thunder of the unscheduled special. They were witnesses. Clara shoved the megaphone through the broken window. She pulled the first sheet of paper from the satchel. "Attention," her voice, tinny and huge, blasted into the night. "This is Clara Reed. I am a journalist. The Atlantic and Pacific Railroad is seizing land under forged documents." The guard froze. The men outside froze. "I have the proof," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I have the forged deed for the DeBee Spring, signed by Silas Vane, over the thumbprint of a dead woman, Mary Begay. I have the corporate seal." She had done it. Her legal attack. The truth was loose. The remaining guard, stunned, looked at his fallen partner. He looked at Clara, who was now just a woman, shaking, holding a piece of paper. He made his choice. He dropped his rifle and put his hands in the air. "Ashki!" Clara ran, the pry bar in her hand. She slammed it into the lock on his chains. The cheap iron shattered. He was free. Ashki Yazi did not pause to thank her. He was a railroad man. He looked at the accelerating landscape. He looked at the chaos on the tender. He knew where they were. He knew where Talon had sent the train. He did it. Ashki breathed, his eyes wide. The quarry switch. He ran to the end of the car and grabbed the large iron wheel, the auxiliary brake. "Hold on!" he yelled. He spun the wheel with all his strength. The train died. The scream of the brakes was a physical agony, a sound of tortured metal. A shower of white-hot sparks erupted from the wheels, illuminating the night. The car lurched, bucking, threatening to tear itself from the tracks. On the tender, the sudden, violent deceleration threw both Talon and May Kestrel. May slid, screaming, toward the gap between the cars. Talon's good hand shot out, and he grabbed her duster, his grip like iron. He held her, saving her from being ground to pieces between the cars. In the engine cab, Vane was thrown against the boiler. The engineer fought the controls. "They have hit the brake," the engineer screamed. "They are stopping us." Vane looked back. He saw his train, his prisoner car, slowing. He saw the fight on the tender. He saw May Kestrel, alive, being held by Talon. He did not see rescuers. He saw liabilities. He saw the quarry, the derailment he was racing toward. And he saw the switched track just ahead. He had to be free. "Uncouple!" Vane screamed. His voice a high-pitched shriek of pure, selfish terror. "Uncouple the engine, leave them all!" The engineer, his face white, grabbed the lever that would pull the pin, that would separate the engine from the tender, from the rest of the train. On the tender, May Kestrel, hanging in Talon's grip, saw it. She saw the engineer move. She saw Vane, his face a mask of terror, betraying her, abandoning her, leaving her to die with the rest of them on a braked car. On a track he thought was still the main line, the fight was gone. Her legend was gone. Her payday was gone. All that was left was Vane's betrayal. "He is leaving us," she whispered, her voice full of a cold, sudden understanding. Talon pulled her up, throwing her onto the coal. May looked at Talon. She looked at the cab where Vane was screaming. She looked at the passenger car, where Clara and Ashki were desperately holding on. She made her choice. She pulled her revolver. "He is not leaving me," she said, her voice a low, deadly growl. She did not shoot Vane. She did not shoot the engineer. She aimed, her hand steady despite the violent lurching. She aimed at the heavy, intricate coupling mechanism between the engine and the tender. She fired, once, twice, 3 times. The heavy-gauge bullets shattered the pin mechanism. With a monstrous final scream of tortured metal, the engine broke free. The engine, suddenly light, unburdened, shot forward like a bullet. Vane's terrified face a white blur in the cab window. The tender and the passenger car, freed from the engine, shuddered violently, grinding to a halt, saved by Ashki's brake. They were stopped. They were alive. Talon, Clara, Ashki, and May Kestrel stood in the sudden, ringing silence, breathing in the smell of ozone and hot metal, and they watched. A quarter-mile down the track, Vane's engine, traveling at over 60 miles an hour, hit the quarry switch. It did not just derail. It flew. The engine leaped into the air, a 300-ton beast, and smashed, full force, into the sheer rock wall of the quarry. The explosion was a sun, a white-hot blossom of steam and fire that lit the canyon for a full 30 seconds. Then, silence, and the rain began. It was not water. It was paper. Vane, in his haste, had loaded his own files, his own ledgers, his own cleaned evidence, onto the engine with him. The explosion had turned his engine into a cannon, firing the truth into the night sky. The townsfolk from the way station, the workers from the quarry, were running toward the crash. They ran into a blizzard of fluttering, burning paper. A man, a simple track layer, reached out and caught a scorched, curling page. He looked at it. It was a land title. His neighbors. Another man picked up a heavy, brass object, half-melted, the corporate seal of the NDP. Clara, Talon, and Ashki stepped down from the passenger car, the satchel in Clara's hand. They watched as the townsfolk, one by one, began to pick up the scattered, damning pieces of the truth from the mud. The war was not over, but it had, in a single, fiery moment, been laid bare for all the world to see. Dawn broke gray and cold, smelling of wet ash and ozone. The crowd at the quarry was a collection of silent, stunned figures wandering through a snowfield of paper. They were miners, track layers, and teamsters, men who had trusted the railroad, men who had believed in Silas Vane's promises. Now, they held the promises in their hands, scorched, wet, damning. A track layer named Hobbs, a man who had worked for the NDP for 10 years, held up the forged deed for Mary Begay's land. His hands, thick with calluses, were shaking. He used a dead woman's name, Hobbs said, his voice a low, sickened rumble. He stole from a dead woman. He stole from all of us, another man said, holding a ledger. This is our water. He was piping it to his own silver mine. He was leaving us, leaving Dust Mesa, to dry up and die. The sound of horses, ridden hard, made them look up. Sheriff Pike arrived, his face purple, his chest puffed with an authority he no longer had. He was followed by 3 terrified, bleary-eyed deputies. "What in the hell?" Pike bellowed, his eyes wide at the wreckage. The crowd, the burned-out train. "I am arresting all of you. This is a riot. This is—" He stopped. Clara, Talon, and Ashki were walking toward him, out of the shadows. They were followed by May Kestrel, her face a mask of mud, her hands empty at her sides. "You!" Pike spat, his eyes landing on Clara. You are under arrest, you. You did this, you. $500. He drew his revolver. "All of you, you are under—" "Put it down, Pike," Hobbs said. His voice was quiet. He did not move. He just stood there, holding the scorched paper. You will obey me." "Hobbs, I am the law." "No," Hobbs said. "You are his dog." He held up the paper. "And your master is dead. We are the law now. We, the people of this valley, the ones he was robbing blind." The crowd, silent a moment before, found its voice. It was not a shout. It was a low, rising growl. They began to move, to circle, not with guns, but with the terrible, heavy weight of their betrayal. Pike looked around. His deputies, seeing the papers in the hands of their neighbors, seeing the half-melted corporate seal, slowly, one by one, raise their hands, They were not with him. Pike, his face a mask of terror, turned to run. 2 miners grabbed him. They tore the tin star from his chest and threw it in the mud. They bound his hands with his own rope. "You will stand trial," Hobbs said, his voice flat. "A real one, not one of Vane's." Sheriff Pike, weeping, was led away. In the silence that followed, all eyes turned to the last figures of the old order, May Kestrel. She stood, alone, between the townsfolk and the dying. She looked at Hobbs, she looked at Talon, she looked at Clara. "Well, Miss Reed," May said, her voice rough, "it seems you write a very powerful story." She took a breath. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she unbuckled her gun belt. The heavy rig, with its 2 matched revolvers, fell to the muddy ground with a soft, final thud. "I am a witness," May Kestrel said, her hands raised, empty. "I witnessed Silas Vane give the order to uncouple the engine. I witnessed him betray his own men." She looked at Clara. "And I am a witness to the theft. I will testify, to whatever federal marshal you can find." She had found her new legend. It was not the angel of the Arizona line. It was the woman who had survived. The woman who had told the truth. The weeks that followed were a painful, uneasy, lurching thaw. Clara's story, filed not with her old, corrupt paper, but with the independent San Miguel Gazette, was a thunderclap. It was not just a story. It was an indictment, complete with the physical, scorched proof from Vane's own files. She wrote of the detonator. She wrote of the forged thumbprint. She wrote of the coal ash in the elixir bottle. She wrote of May Kestrel's betrayal by Vane and Talon's race to save his friend. The story was picked up by the Telegraph. It ran in St. Louis, in Chicago, in New York. The Arizona Water War was not a story of savages. It was a story of corporate greed, a story of an American company robbing its own citizens and blaming the natives. The Atlantic and Pacific Consolidated was hit with a federal investigation. Its stock plummeted. Its power, for a time, was broken. In Dust Mesa, the healing was slower. It was not done with paper. It was done with sweat and words. In the ruins of the burned-out cantina, Doña Marisol, now the town's unofficial mayor, hosted a new kind of meeting. On one side sat Hastine Yazzie and Shi Yaji. On the other sat Hobbs, the track layer, and 2 ranchers whose land had been purchased by Vane. Clara sat in the corner, her notebook open. But she was not writing. She was listening. They were not friends. They would, perhaps, never be friends. But they were neighbors. "The spring," Hastine Yazzie said, his voice flat. "To be. It is ours. The town needs water," Hobbs said, his voice stubborn. Our wells are running dry, because of his dam. We need the spring. You will not steal it." "Sure," Yazzie said. "No," Hobbs said. He looked at the old woman, and his face, for the first time, softened with a pained respect. "We will not. We ask to share. We will pay. Not in paper. In flour. In cattle. In respect." It was the beginning. They called it the To-Be Water Accord. It was a small, handwritten document that laid out the rights of the stream and the responsibilities of the people who lived near it. The farms that had been stolen were returned. The fences were, slowly, being mended. Talon was not at the meeting. He was 10 miles north, in the high country. His arm, finally healing, was in a clean sling. He was standing on a ridge he knew, a ridge he had last seen wearing a blue coat. He walked down into the small canyon. A family was there, a man and 2 children, tending a meager patch of corn. The man looked up, and his face went hard. He remembered Talon. He remembered the blue coat. The man said nothing, just stood, his hand on the handle of his hoe. Talon stopped, 20 feet away. He did not make excuses. He did not talk about Vane, or the railroad, or his own pain. "I was the scout," Talon said, his voice quiet. "I led the soldiers here. I was a fool. I thought I was a bridge. I was just a different kind of weapon." He looked at the man. "I cannot bring back the sheep they killed. I cannot I cannot undo the fear. He paused. I am sorry. The word hung in the dry, clean air. The man, his face a mask of old grief, just stared. Talon looked at the small, leaking irrigation ditch that fed the man's corn. Your ditch is broken, he said. He walked past the man, knelt by the ditch, and, with his one good hand, began to rearrange the stones, to pack the mud, to stop the leak. He worked for an hour, in silence. The man watched him. When the water was flowing clean and strong, Talon stood up. He nodded, once, to the man, and turned to leave. Your arm, the man said, his first words. It's bad. It will heal, Talon said. Wait, the man said. He went into his hogan. He came back with a small pouch. My wife, she was a healer. This is for the pain. Talon took the pouch. My thanks, he said. He had begun. It was not atonement. It was just work, the work of the living. That night, there was a fire. Not a fire of war, but of celebration. The Dine had returned to the lands around to be. The dam was a ruin, and the spring flowed free. The sound of a single hand-held drum echoed, a beat that matched the pulse of the earth. Children, their faces bright, chased each other, their laughter a sound that had not been heard in this valley for months. Clara sat on a blanket, her notebook in her lap. She was not a curiosity. She was not the $500 woman. She was, for tonight, a guest. She was the woman who wrote the truth. She watched, and she wrote. But her writing had changed. She was not just describing. She was listening. She wrote about the sound of the drum. She wrote about the smell of the juniper smoke. She wrote about the way Shayazi held a small child, her face in the firelight, no longer a map of hard lines, but a testament to survival. Talon sat down beside her. He was quiet, his presence a comfort, a solid, warm reality in the flickering light. He watched the dancers. Clara stopped writing. She looked at her notebook. It was full. The story was told. It is done, she said, her voice quiet. No, he said, not looking at her. It is beginning. She turned to the last page. She had written an appendix, a manifest of a different kind, a primer on the rights of water, legal and human. It was a short, powerful essay, part law, part poetry, about what it meant for a people to be tied to a spring, to a river, to the life of the land. I need a co-author, she said, her voice small. I do not know the land, not like you. I only know the paper. I would be honored. Talon, if you would, sign this with me. She held out her pen. He looked at her. He looked at the firelight dancing in her eyes. He looked at the book, her truth. A slow, pained, beautiful smile touched his lips. He took his good hand. But he did not take the pen. He reached out and gently, very gently, took her hand, the one holding the pen. He folded her fingers back over it, and then he placed her hand, with the pen still in it, on the cover of the closed notebook. It is your voice, Clara Reed, he said. You have earned it. You have told the truth. He kept his hand over hers, on the book, for a long, shared moment. You just needed to be shown where to stand. She turned her hand under his, her fingers lacing with his. The paper was between them, but this time, it was not a lie. It was a bridge. The test dam did not stand for long. It was not torn down by dynamite or righteous fury, but by shovels. Hobbs and Ashki, the track layer and the former captive, led a team of men from both the town and the Dine reservation. They dismantled Vane's monument to greed, plank by plank, and used the lumber to rebuild the cantina. The Atlantic and Pacific consolidated, gutted by the federal investigation and the public shame of Clara's articles, withdrew from the valley, its iron rails already beginning to rust. In its place, the people of the valley, guided by a new council, established the To Be Community Water Fund. It was a simple jar of paper and promises, but it was stronger than Vane's steel. The old, mud-splattered building that had once been Sheriff Pike's office now had a new sign. It was painted in simple, clean, black letters, "The Mesa Gazette." Clara Reed, proprietor. It was a small, one-room operation, but the printing press, a small, second-hand model from Santa Fe, was the loudest thing in town. It ran twice a week, and it told the truth. Talon Bigay was rarely in town. His war was over. His work was just beginning. He led a new kind of team, not of scouts, but of guardians. They were men and women, dine and settler, armed not with rifles, but with shovels and saplings. They followed the path of Tabi as it flowed clean from the spring. They dug new, clean irrigation ditches, reinforcing them with stone, not to control the water, but to ask it to stay. They planted cottonwood and wild rye along the banks, a slow, green promise against the erosion and the dust. His wound, healing into a long, ropey scar, was a reminder of what the land cost. His work was a reminder of what it gave. They did not live together, not in the way the town understood. He would come to the back door of the print shop as the sun was setting. She would have coffee, hot and black, waiting. They would sit on the small porch, not talking, just watching the color drain from the sky, the land turning purple and blue. One evening, she had watched him working on the new ditch, his good arm strong, his bad arm still favoring the load. He had looked up, seen her, and he had not smiled, but his eyes had, that night, on the porch. She said, This is permanent. This is not a story I am just writing." He took her hand, the one smudged with printer's ink. "No," he said, his voice quiet. "It is not. It is a choice. I do not know how to promise forever. Talon," she whispered. He turned her hand over, his thumb tracing the scar on her palm. "I do not ask for forever. That is a white man's paper word. It is a cage. I only ask for the sunrise. We choose each other every sunrise. That is a harder promise. It is one we have to mean, every day." She had leaned her head on his good shoulder. "Yes," she said, "every sunrise." Inside the small office, on the wall just behind the printing press, hung a leather thong. On it, the heavy, dark turquoise stone. It was not a trophy. It was not a reminder of a fall. It was a reminder of roots, of the sky, of a choice. When the children of the town came in, curious about the noisy machine, they would always ask about the stone, and Clara would tell them. She would tell them it was a shield, given by a guardian. Her old notebook, the one stained with mud and blood, was full. She had started a new one. This one was clean. In the last 10 pages, she had left blank. Shayazi, visiting the town for the first time in 20 years to trade, had seen the book. She had pointed at the empty pages. "This is good." The old woman had said, "You have left room for the voices that do not use your words." Far from Dust Mesa, in a federal courtroom, May Kestrel gave her testimony. It was precise, cold, and utterly damning. She had saved herself, but she had also told the truth. When she was released, she did not return to the bounty trade. Her fame, such as it was of a different kind. The last Clara heard, May Kestrel had taken a new job. She was the lead guard, with a repeating shotgun, for the first clean water convoy, the one paid for by the 2B Fund, heading for the high country farms. She had found a war, finally, that paid in something other than blood. The wind in the high mesa no longer carried the taste of dust. It carried, faintly, the smell of damp earth, of young cottonwoods. It carried the scent of rain, still a day away, but coming. In the valley, the Toby spring flowed, its voice a low, constant whisper. Justice, Clara wrote, was not a final act. It was not a verdict or a headline or a dead man at the bottom of a quarry. Justice was not a favor, granted by the powerful. It was a current, a living thing. It was a current we protect together, every day, with our hands and our words. From the small print shop, a new sound joined the wind, The sharp, mechanical ring of the printing press bell. A line finished, a truth set, and, from the street outside, a sound that was, for the first time, louder than the distant, ghostly memory of a train whistle. The sound of children laughing. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I truly appreciate you spending your time with me here in the West. I would love to know where you are all listening from. Please leave a comment below and let me know so we can share this space together. If this tale touched you, please consider subscribing to the channel, Wild West Tales, and give this video a like. And if you really want to support the channel, you can hit that hype button to help this story be heard by even more folks. Thank you again.